We are now going to change the topic quite a bit, but we're sticking to the revolution approach. Kindly asked to get seated. Thank you. With the mission to create a bank that the world loves, N26 had a very broad perspective on the mission that they want to accomplish. He gave us a chance already in 2017, and we are very proud that he is here today with us. In the meantime, N26 has grown to include more than 3.5 million customers across 24 European markets, and also recently launched in the US. Bringing innovation from Europe to the world is his title. We are very excited to welcome him on stage. Founder and CEO, Valentin Stalf. Welcome.
Thank you. First of all, thanks for the invitation to Vienna. It's always great to be back in Vienna. I've been growing up in Vienna, and it's always great to get some Sacher cake or some melange, which I did actually yesterday. So I will today talk a little bit about innovation and why innovation we have the chance, and I think one of the options for Europe to secure its future is definitely innovation. I'll talk first a little bit about what actually innovation means, then give you a little bit of an insight why banking was ready for innovation, and in the end, why I think Europe has some chances to do more innovation out of Europe for the world. So first of all, what actually is innovation? I think when we are in Europe, we sometimes think about innovation of something very abstract. But I think innovation today is, in the end, do you do something better for customers? And do you create value for customers? And that's something we shouldn't forget. Sometimes if we think about innovation, and obviously innovation has different steps, and there needs to be the foundation of innovation, which is more technology, maybe where the impact is not so clear. But in the end, innovation is all about the impact to customers and creating value for customers. So innovation is not something that is only technical that no one understands, but in the end should materialize in value for customers. One of our investors is Thiel, and I think most of you know his book or have seen his book or heard about it. If not, then I would recommend to read it. It's 0 to 1. And he's talking a lot about what actually innovation is and how do you get to innovation. And I think what we have a lot in Europe, especially in Germany, is 1 to N. So it's having innovation and making it better, making it more global, going to new countries. But it's not this, there's nothing, and bring something for customers. So this 0 to 1, as Thiel calls it. And I think that is very, very important to understand that innovation is 0 to 1. It's not something that hasn't been there, and do it at least, how he says, 10x better. So something that innovates needs to be 10x better than something that has been there before. I think that is very, very important if we talk about innovation. Why was banking actually ready for innovation? And at N26, what we do is we believe that we can build a bank the world loves to use. That's kind of our mission. And I think it's a bold mission because most people don't care about their banks, and it's actually something that they don't really like to do. But why was banking ready for innovation? First of all, today, in a lot of industries, technology is transforming them. So if you have difficulties to adopt technology, normally it's an industry that is ready for disruption. It's ready for new entrants. And all the companies that I've listed here, there's actually one from Europe, which is Spotify, take innovation and product-driven innovation as their core. As you see, there is not many companies around the world that do that thing in finance. So I don't know many companies that do it global in finance. I mean, maybe one from Europe that is more global companies transfer-wise, more into international transaction space, but it's not many companies innovating in finance, and that's a huge opportunity. So our true belief was we build a bank, a brand, and a service for customers, so a global bank. That is the bank that digital people should go to all around the world. The second thing, besides all traditional banks, I think, not being the best in technology. I think the second thing is, that is definitely something that was driving our adoption, is that there is a big loss of trust into traditional banks. With the financial crisis, but you actually see it every day. Bank bashing is something that got very, very common, and it's something that people are engaged or drives people to choose a new banking player. And the third thing, why did we do it in Europe, and why could we actually do it in Europe, and why is Europe so important? We would have never been able to do a global banking idea out of, let's say, Austria only. Fundamentally is that we have the European Union, and that we have a lot of things that enable us to serve a single market. Because if you don't have a single market where you start the company, where you start to innovate, we'll never be able to tackle other markets at the same size. So with having the European Union, there's a couple of things and things that happened in the last years that made it able for us to innovate out of Europe. So first of all, it's that we operating today with one banking license in all European markets. So it means we don't need to get a new banking license in all the markets, but we have one German banking license where we can act in 24 markets across Europe today. Then I think a couple of innovation that we see that helps us obviously to serve all over Europe is SEPA as one payment standard. So you don't need to integrate with the Spanish payment systems, with the German payment systems, but basically you do one integration. And you can actually today do a transfer all over Europe within 24 hours. And there's other things like PSD2, which has just been gotten mandatory in the last weeks, which will transform this even more and make Europe, as I think, as one good starting point to innovate globally. But if we wouldn't have the European Union, and if we wouldn't have this big single market, we'd have no chance to innovate from Austria to, like, let's say, the US or to Brazil. So it's very important that we get this big single market, and I think there needs to be much more done also still on the European Union level to grant that it's really a single market. For a lot of these things, it's not really a single market. So if you look at consumer protection, each market in Europe thinks they have better rules, and so you need to adapt to 24 different consumer protection rights in the end. Then how do we approach this, and what do we do different in banking, and how do we think, or how do we bring 10x to our customers in terms of our product is 10x better? Today we are one of the fastest growing banks around the planet, especially on the mobile phone. And I think we build our promise on 3 to 4 things that we did different. First of all, it's all about the product. If you look at global successful companies in consumer digital, it's all product driven. So it's not marketing driven per se, but it's really the product. The product innovates. The product makes you reach people, makes people talk about it. Why is this so important today? And I would say much more important than it was 20 or 25 years ago, or 10 years ago even. Because if you have a great product, today you have an app store, a Google App Store, a Play Store, and an Apple App Store. And if you have a product out there, you get a lot of customer reviews. If you have 5 stars, you immediately create trust. So that was the foundation for us even to build a bank, because before, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, we would have needed to invest a lot into marketing, traditional marketing. But today we didn't invest anything in the first years. People went onto the App Store, saw our app, rated with 5 stars, and then immediately trusted us as being a bank. And that wouldn't have been possible years before. So that's why you need to focus so much on the product. The user experience, I will talk a little bit more afterwards. I have a couple of slides where I show a couple of features that I think we do different than most of the traditional banks. And then very, very important, also contributing to this 10x better, obviously you have a better service and at the same time have a completely different price that is also sustainable. That contributes to you being 10x better. Especially in banking, you see a price level. Austria, I would say, is one of the exceptional countries where actually banking is quite cheap. Also, Germany is not the most expensive market in banking, but if you look at France, if you look at Spain, if you look at other markets in Europe, people pay much too much for their banking services. So we went into the market and undercutted all the prices. So today, if you open a bank account, a retail bank account at N26, normally it's a free product and it's very price competitive. So normally you would save around 100 to 150 euros per year on all your banking transactions. So transparency and the pricing was very important for us, but why were we able actually to do that for the long run? Mainly what we did is we built a bank from scratch. Because of the regulation, because of getting a banking license, one license in Europe, what it is we got our own license and we built our own bank. So basically, we did everything from scratch. Our bank is, I think, the first one, or has been the first one in Europe that runs completely in the cloud. So our bank runs completely in the Amazon cloud, so we don't have any servers or anything, and that helps us to scale. And it helps us, obviously, to have a completely different cost level. So if you compare our cost level per customer to the one of a traditional bank, it's maybe 1/5. And if you have 1/5 in cost level, you can share that between your shareholders and your customers, and you will be much, much cheaper and have the better service at a better price. But price is not the only thing. If you build your own bank from scratch, then obviously you have no restrictions. You can do almost everything. So if you look at our product, everything works in real time. And the app feels very, I would say, native and very, very good. And that's only possible because our backend infrastructure is much, much better. So if you look at, for example, Deutsche Bank, I think Deutsche Bank tried to invest and change their core banking system. I think they invested about $1 billion or €1 billion into changing the core banking system. Just to give you a perspective, when we started our company, we raised a seed round of 500,000 euros, and then another 2 million euro round, and that brought us to getting a banking license, having our own systems running. And Deutsche Bank tried to invested actually $1 billion in changing the core banking system and stopped the project because it was too complex. Obviously today we've raised more than $600 million, but mainly not for investment into our core banking system, but for investment into our brand, for investment into regional expansion. Some things maybe that are different that you might know also from now having other people having adopted them as well. You can open a bank account with us in, I would say, 5 minutes, depending on which country you are. You do a video conference, and then 2 days later you get a card shipped. So quite easy access to a bank account, which especially gets more important if we go to more markets where not everybody has a bank account. So we'll be starting in Brazil next year as well. In Brazil, you have a lot of people that don't have a bank account. So if they can get a bank account, you can actually jump the step of having ever had a branch bank. So a bank that has actually outlets at the high street. Another innovation I think that we brought, just to give you a feeling why I think our product is 10x better. So today, within N26, you can actually open accounts, like sub-accounts, as easy as WhatsApp groups. So you can just say, okay, you want to open a new account. You give it a name, let's say it's your family account, and then you can say you can invite 5 of your family members that also have access to the account. So I think most of the things that we do in innovation in banking are actually known from other areas, but if you do them in banking, it's obviously much more difficult because in the background you have regulation, you have a lot of other things. And then things that drove also the adoption of our product and made us one of the fastest growing banks in Europe is obviously the big players supporting what we do. Apple Pay, for example, is a massive driver for us that people join us because most of the German banks, for example, haven't adopted Apple Pay. So most of the people that want to use Apple Pay join N26. So maybe the last point of my presentation, so first one was on innovation. I think on innovation, we need to be more aggressive and think about innovation more as 0 to 1 and not as N 1 to N. The second thing, I think, I hope I showed you a little bit of why banking, I think, was ready for disruption first, because all the banks were suffering in trust. Second thing, I think, big problems with transforming into technology, dealing with mobile. Customers have completely changed. And the third thing is definitely a price problem, because a lot of structures, high street banks, and so on. But why do I think and why do we do that and why we have a clear commitment to Europe and why were we able to do it from Europe? First of all, to go from 0 to 1, I think having a lot of countries, having different cultures is great. That is something that you need to be innovative. And that's what I see in all our teams. So we have an office in Berlin with about 1,000 people. We have another office in Barcelona. We're now opening an office in Vienna. And I think this multicultural, a lot of people having a lot of ideas in different languages, having seen how people act differently, is a perfect setup to bring innovation global. Because if you look at the US companies from time to time, they have difficulties actually to adapt to different regions. Obviously, the US is a very, very important market, so a lot of companies are still successful because they are successful in the US, but it's always a challenge for them, for example, for coming to Europe. The other thing that we've seen, if you compare, for example, Berlin, Vienna, even London, to the Silicon Valley and the price levels, then you will quickly understand that actually Europe is quite a cheap place to live at a high quality. And that's something that we are discovering more and more. We have a lot of people that relocate from all over the world and are very, very happy to come to Europe. That's something I think we need to be aware of as Europeans, as someone who has built a company here. I think this is one of the strengths of Europe, that we have high living quality at relatively low cost and can attract actually these days global talent. Also, I think the political situation in the US is also a big driver that we can attract even more talent in Europe. And I think the regulatory framework in banking especially, but also in the single market in Europe is fundamental to bring any innovation globally. But that's something I think we have to one extent sometimes. I think if I would have one ask to kind of finish my presentation, I think it would be more investment into education. I think actually it's easy. If you compare the European budgets and look at how much goes into education, you'll find out most of it goes into cows. And I don't think cows will be saving our future in Europe. So I think there needs to be a fundamental rethinking, and maybe also rethinking going from 0 to 1 instead of from always innovating or changing the budget a little bit. Thank you for your attention, and I hope I could tell you a little bit about innovation, how we think about it at N26.
Thank you so much, Valentin.